Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. I was really excited for this book. I've never read V.E. Schwab before, but I've heard a lot of great things about her writing. And this is like a mainstream book. Like, this is a big deal. Seems like it's getting a lot of attention, probably very successful, very popular. And I was very enticed by the idea of a mainstream Toxic Lesbian Vampires book. So I was really, really looking forward to this, and it does not really deliver on what I wanted. There's parts of this that are undeniably good, but there's also parts that just aren't super successful or just aren't what I'm looking for in a book, which is really a shame because I really wanted to enjoy it, and I did on some levels, but I don't know that I could say this is a good book. I don't think it's a bad book, but I wouldn't call it good either. It's kind of both. It's kind of good and bad. And I think your experience reading this will depend on what type of book you want and what you expect going into this. I still don't think it'd be perfect even if you really like this tone and this very slow pacing and this very sprawling story. It's very long. It covers a lot of ground because it's about vampires who live for centuries. Even if you're into that, I don't think this will be a perfect book in your eyes, but you might enjoy it more than me. I could see how people do enjoy this, and this does have some good reviews, but I just had some problems with it that I'm going to talk about. Now this video will have spoilers, because some of the things I want to talk about are spoilers. The good news with that is this book has little to no plot, so spoilers don't really matter. This isn't a book that is about the plot, it is about the characters and their journeys and their life stories. Most of this book is literally just a fucking biography, which is one of my main complaints with it, honestly. But if you're into that, and you're just here for the characters, and you just want to see random scenes of their lives, then you will like this. But if you're looking for a real plot, this ain't the book for you. So this is a vampire story. It's told from 3 different perspectives. We have 3 main characters, and the distribution of the perspectives is incredibly uneven, both in the amount of screen time each of these characters get, and then also in when their point of view is delivered. So Charlotte is one of the characters. She doesn't show up until the back half of the novel. We don't get her perspective, except for one brief chapter near the beginning of the novel. We get her perspective, but it's still just like one chapter. And I guess it does a good job of showing you that Charlotte will be a character, and it does provide some mystery and, like, you know, just some teasing, some little inklings thrown at you to make you wonder, what is this and where is this going? But you don't get a lot of Charlotte until the end. And the first half of this novel is very, very heavily centered on a character named Maria, who later renames herself Sabine. So I'm probably going to use both of those names interchangeably. And the other main character is a girl named Alice, who you get like randomly peppered throughout. But Sabine is by far the main character. Well, that's not what I want to say. Sabine is the character with the most screen time. I would argue that Alice is the main character, which is also a problem of mine because she's probably the least interesting. I would refer to Alice as a Nina LaCour protagonist. She's like a 20-year-old, 20-year-old college girl who's just sad, and she has a sad, troubled family life and a dead sister, which I think is actually supposed to be a spoiler. Like, you don't find out that her sister is dead until the very, very end of the book. But, like, I assumed she was dead the whole time, because we get all of these flashbacks to her and her, like, childhood with her sister and her sister's fraught relationship, whatever. It doesn't matter. She's just a sad college girl. And the tone of this is just sad girl. If you've ever read a Nina LaCour novel, I read a lot of Nina LaCour's, a lot of her characters are like sad teenagers dealing with grief. And sometimes that's successful and sometimes it isn't. And if this were a Nina LaCour novel, it would be one of the better ones. But in comparison to the other characters and the other storylines that V. Schwab has written, this is not the most interesting one. And also, V. Schwab is clearly a much better writer than Nina LaCour. Nina LaCour has some okay books and, like, one really good book. But V. Schwab, the prose here is lovely. The prose in this book is spectacular, gorgeous, beautiful. I see why people like V. Schwab. Beautiful metaphors, beautiful like character traits and sort of character building, and the way she's able to defy expectations, the way she's able to show rather than tell. And the prose, just the prose. The prose is so nice, and there's like little callbacks to things in the beginning and like thematic imagery that keeps coming back. And so this is clearly a very, very talented writer. It's the plot structure that does not work for me in this book. The physical writing, the words on the page, gorgeous. And if you really, really like that and you don't mind a slow story and like no plot, but just a lot of character immersion, you will like this book. And you will like it on the back of E. Schwab's writing, which is absolutely the strength of this book. However, I feel like I would describe this plot as she didn't know what she wanted to write when she sat down to write. I feel like she was figuring the story out as she was writing it. And I would say it feels like two very different books kind of mushed together. So we have Sad Girl Alice, who's based in 2019, contemporary. This is like her coming of age story. Like she's just moved to college in a new country in America after living in Scotland as a kid, and her sister died, and she's got like this fresh start, and she's just like sad and aimless. And she gets turned into a vampire, and she is on a mission to track down the woman who turned her into a vampire, this girl she met at a party and hooked up with, which is the only plot in this book, especially for the first 50% of this book, arguably even like 60 to 70% of this book. That is the only plot, is these moments of Alice trying to track down the woman who turned her into a vampire. And again, in the first 50% of the book, Alice is not the most seen character, so the actual moments of plot are pretty sparse. So that sort of coming of age, plot-driven vampire story is like sort of an afterthought. That's only a small part of this, but it's also the main part of this because that's the only plot, and so that becomes the main story in the end. But most of this book is a sprawling historical epic about Sabine, who is born Maria. We see her childhood in the 1500s in Spain. We see her grow up and get married off to this viscount. We see her be very unsatisfied with her life and her position as a woman in society, and we see her scheme her way into freedom. And she meets a woman named Sabine, who is a vampire who turns her, but that Sabine dies, and so Maria, desperate to forge a new life, steals Sabine's name. She's very inspired by this woman who basically set her free and gave her this grand new life. And then we see most of her life, the next 500 years of her life. We just get her entire backstory, and there is no plot to this. There is no endpoint. There is no goal. We're just getting her life story and these little vignettes of moments in her life. And we skip a lot of time, often, because she lives for 500 years, and we can't go scene by scene through her day-to-day life, because that would be ridiculous. But we get, in chapter breaks or in section breaks. The way this book is structured is weird, I'll get into that too. But we just get like random moments from her life. And some of these are more interesting than others. Some of them I was pretty engaged, I was down for, I was enjoying them. I think her early days as a vampire are the best parts of this book. Like when she first meets Sabine and gets turned into a vampire, and then immediately after that, that was like the best part of this book for me. But that's just like one brief section, and it's not a plot, and it doesn't go anywhere. And there are some characters that we meet that just don't really go anywhere. Like she meets some other vampires. There's a point where she's living on a boat with this vampire couple, and you kind of expect them to come back because she's friends with them, but then they sort of drift apart. And then she also has another friend who is this man. He's a vampire, and he's in a relationship with a human man, and those two are a really big part of her life. And then she just kind of drifts away from them, and we don't see that character again. And I really thought that character, the vampire man, was going to come back, but he doesn't. And so it's just like there's a lot of characters that don't really do anything, and a lot of these sections don't serve anything except to just tell you Maria's backstory. So it's literally just a biography of this vampire woman who started off as just a Spanish peasant girl. But she is an interesting character. She's very sympathetic. So we see her upbringing, and we see the struggle she faced as a woman and as a gay woman in the 1500s and the 1600s and the 1700s. And so that's definitely one of the themes of this is sexism and women and freedom and homophobia, and building a life for yourself and having to take it and claim it and live amongst the shadows and subvert things, and to not be maybe this perfect person. In order to get what you want, things aren't messy. You have to go against the grain. You have to build this life yourself. She kills her husband at one point because she doesn't like him. That's the only way she's gonna get away from him. So we see her make some morally gray choices, but she's a very sympathetic character because we know her whole fucking life story. And we really understand where she's coming from. And she's honestly not that morally gray. I mean, she's a vampire. She kills people. But for a lot of the book, you're like, you get it. There's a part where she starts to enjoy the hunt and like the thrill, and like the gay vampire guy teaches her to like pick a target and then pursue it. Don't just feed recklessly every single night. Draw it out, edging. He teaches her edging. And so she pursues these women for like months and then eventually kills them. So we see her getting into toxicness. I've seen this marketed as toxic lesbian vampires, and yeah, I guess they are, but honestly, the toxicity doesn't even come in till over halfway through the novel, so I don't necessarily know why it was marketed like that. I mean, I do, I guess, because there's no other plot to mention, but that was kind of another criticism. And someone might disagree with me on this. Someone who like was really, really, really into this and was really into analyzing this and maybe read it multiple times and maybe like knew what to look for on a second read would disagree with me here. But around the 50% mark, after that, we get Charlotte's point of view. And Charlotte is a woman from the 1800s. She was like a noble woman adjacent who gets turned into a vampire by Sabine, who at that point is looking for like a partner. Like, she was inspired by the gay vampire man who took a human lover and had him for a while, and she has been lonely, hasn't found anyone that she's, been with, like, really romantically connected with. So she finds Charlotte and turns Charlotte into a vampire, and then they are a couple for a while. But Sabine, like, becomes the villain at this point. And at this point, we really stop getting Sabine's perspective. We just get Charlotte's perspective of this next series of events. And the last 100 or so, maybe 150 even, years of Sabine's life, we don't get Sabine's perspective on. And in those last 150 years, and like with Charlotte and whatever, like, she becomes a villain, and she's like very controlling and manipulative over Charlotte, and is like gaslighting her and keeping her away from any other vampires so that she doesn't become attached to them, doesn't make any other friends, and is just fully committed to Sabine. And I didn't quite understand why Sabine was doing that. And then Charlotte eventually leaves her and is like, oh, I'm in an abusive relationship, and leaves her. And then Sabine just like chases her down and like follows her everywhere and stalks her. This is like the end of the book. This is the final plot, when there's actually like kind of a plot happening. This goes into the modern day up to 2019, when Alice gets turned into a vampire by Charlotte. So all these stories are interconnected, but again, tonally they feel pretty different. There's some thematic overlap, and again, they are all connected by characters eventually, but they still feel like very distinct stories in a way. But we get to this final plot where Charlotte is being stalked by Sabine and needs to like kill her. And they do. She ropes Alice into helping her kill her. Charlotte can't do it because there's a thing where if a vampire makes a promise, they have to keep it. And when Charlotte was in a relationship with Sabine, she made the promise to never hurt Sabine. So she cannot kill Sabine, but Alice can. And so these two baby vampires trick Sabine, basically, and end up killing her. Which was really not satisfying, because Sabine's like this 500-year-old badass, and she's very crafty, she's very clever. She was like that even when she was alive, and she knows all of these skills, all of these things, and we get told repeatedly that, older vampires get more powerful. They learn to harness their powers more. They learn to like control space. So, you know, there's ownership is a thing. This is a vampire lore where like you have to be invited into someone's home, but you can also, if you're strong enough, just like claim space as a vampire, stake your ground, and you can read people's minds, which doesn't come up at all. We get that repeatedly with like side characters where we learn that older vampires can read people's minds, especially young vampires, because they're very emotional. So Alice is very much like an open book, and Sabine's like a 500-year-old fucking mass murderer, stalker, psychopath, evil villain, genius. And basically the plan is Alice just seduces her, and it works, and she stabs her. And it's like real dumb, like if you think about it too long. Cause like one, Sabine should have known that it was a trick. Like I feel like she should have been able to read Alice's mind and like emotions and like known it was a trick. Unless she did know it was a trick and she wanted to die. I don't know. I don't really think it was that. Maybe you could make that argument. I don't know. By the end, I didn't like love this. I didn't care. I'm not gonna try to sit here and like go back through it and try to figure out if Sabine was suicidal. I don't think so. But it just felt so silly that these two baby vampires, and one of them's a baby, one of them's like a toddler. I guess she's like 200 years old. But like 200 years plus 2 days as a vampire, it's probably been a little more than that, like 2 weeks as a vampire, versus 500 years as a vampire. Like they're not gonna win. Like what are these babies doing? And you don't care about the babies because we get Sabine's whole story. And so like we feel the gravitas of Sabine. And we know how strong she is. And like we just got Charlotte. We just got introduced to Charlotte. And so she's like a new character kind of coming in. And then Alice is just like some mopey teenager. And they kill the 500-year-old vampire? I don't think so. But then also Charlotte turns out to be kind of evil. Like she repeatedly lies to Alice just to get Alice to do what she wants. Which I didn't know what that was trying to say either. Again, I could really sit here and try to dwell on the themes and like the final message of this book, but I don't want to. And again, some of the themes are very overt, especially in the beginning. We get the stuff with the sexism and like how women have to move through the world differently, and there's definitely a lot to analyze here. But like this final encounter, I didn't know what to make of it or what it was trying to say. So basically Charlotte also dies. Alice also kills Charlotte because she lied to her repeatedly. And there's a thing where apparently vampires inevitably become corrupted. Like you might start out as a good person, you might initially feel guilt about killing people, you might not want to kill them, you might just want to drink their blood and then send them away. But inevitably every vampire loses like their human component, like their soul and like their compassion and empathy, I guess. Which I don't know what that wants to say. Like I don't know what that means for like the broader things, which like because I don't know, that seems like so cynical as a message of like you will never get better, you will only ever grow more bitter and worse, and you will never be more compassionate than the people who came before you, and you will never learn from anyone else's mistakes, and you cannot change this, everything will go to shit, you will die. I guess from a death perspective, that means, you know, death is inevitable, don't try to stop death. But a lot of these characters in this book don't, like, willingly choose vampirism. I guess some of them do. Sabine does. But, like, Alice doesn't. So a lot of these characters aren't, like, greedy, evil people who just want to live forever. You know? They're just, like, people who... like Sabine, who didn't have a lot of options, knew she wasn't going to have a good life as a woman in the 1500s, married to this awful older man who didn't see her as anything but like an object to have babies for him. And so like you don't blame her at all for wanting to be powerful and immortal and like have a chance at having a real life. And so like why does she have to get corrupted for that? Like what does that say? What does that do for the messaging in this book? I don't know. And then I would have liked to see more about the side characters, like the gay vampire man who's older than Sabine, and he teaches her a lot of things. I wanted him to come back, and I wanted him to be like older than Sabine, and I wanted to see someone who was good. So we see some older vampire figures throughout this book, but they only come up like once, You never see them again at a supremely later date. And so, did they all become corrupted as well? Or, like, did they live normal lives and that's just a myth and Sabine was just evil? Or was Charlotte just evil? I don't know. Charlotte wasn't evil. And then at the end, it's even like, I think they explode into a pile of ash, and Sabine was like just ash. But when Charlotte died, there was like more meat to her because she was still more human than Sabine was. She hadn't been totally corrupted. But the inevitability of corruption, I don't know what that message does. I don't get the meaning there. Someone might. I'm sure I could be swayed with an argument here from someone who actually cares and like really delved into the analysis of this, but I didn't really understand what that was trying to say. And it's not very satisfying because Alice lives at the end of the book, and so presumably she's just gonna turn into a terrible person at some point. Great. I thought she was gonna kill herself actually, because we find out her sister killed herself, and I thought maybe she'd kill herself too to stop her from becoming a terrible person. But she doesn't do that, which I also liked because I think her thing is to, her character goal, her arc, the only character with an actual fucking arc, her arc is to appreciate life. Again, she's this sad college girl who's struggling with the grief of losing her sister and like her bad family dynamics, but she has her whole life ahead of her, and she starts to realize that as she loses her life and she regrets being a vampire, even though like she didn't do it intentionally, but she's like, you took my life from me. And that's why she wants to find the woman who did this to her, because she doesn't want it and she wants to turn human again. And she can't. But she wants her life. So she grows to develop an appreciation for her life that she doesn't have anymore. And apparently she won't care about in the future because she's just gonna turn evil, I guess. But that makes sense for that type of character arc, where it's a coming of age story, where you realize you have your whole life ahead of you and you shouldn't dwell on the past and you should find happiness in the present and, you know, do your own thing and not get caught up in your family. It's a very Nina LaCour storyline. Not that Nina LaCour invented YA or even sad YA, but that's just so Nina LaCour. I've been reading a lot of Nina LaCour this year, and she's another queer author. So if you read this book because it's queer, you might know Nina LaCour, and so you might understand the connection I'm making here. So it feels so silly to have what can only be described as a Nina LaCour protagonist defeat the 500-year-old vampire of a sprawling adult historical novel about vampires and power. So it's like, that just wasn't like satisfying as an ending. I mean, it kind of makes sense for Alice's character. I mean, she develops an appreciation for life she didn't have. But there's no way this book, like, if you can't present this book about like 500 years of vampire history and like the interconnectedness of these three people and be like, it's a YA tale about this girl appreciating life, and it's like, that's so like infantile, because this isn't a YA novel. I would describe this as adult. It's just like Alice's story specifically is very new adult. It's not YA because she hooks up with this vampire and she's in college and she kills people. It's new adult, but it's got like that teenage vibes, you know, coming of age story. So it's just weird. It's a weird mix of like genre, and they're written the same way and they're both written really well, but like if you actually analyze it, this was just a fucking Nina LaCour story. Written really, really, really well. Better than Nina LaCour can write it. But like, why was that this story? And like, why did we get so much time focused on just Sabine's aimless backstory? Like, she's just wandering, like we're just telling the tale. Is that just to understand the villain? But I didn't really like that she became just an evil villain. And I didn't understand her thought process. I really wanted Sabine's voice in the back half of this novel, and like after Charlotte leaves her. And like, what is her thought process of wanting to track down Charlotte? Like, what is her motivation? Like, I don't really understand it. And I missed her voice, because she's a very rational character. She's not just crazy evil until she is. Is it really just that she turned evil, or am I not thinking hard enough about it? Or I feel like the book missed an opportunity to really delve into that character and give that character a purpose. Like, what is her purpose? She has no goal. It's just like her life story. I guess at some point you could argue that her goal is to not be alone and to find love, but that doesn't really come up until halfway through the book, and that's only one section. So I don't really think that's like her goal. She's not like a character who's supremely lonely her entire life and is really missing connection and really, really feels like she needs somebody. I mean, there are moments where she's lonely and she is happy to meet like other vampires for the first time, but you don't get the sense that her whole story is just a love story where she really, really wants to fall in love, and then when the girl dumps her, she just can't give it up. It's like, just, I don't know. And the stalking felt contrived. Like, I feel like she could have killed Charlotte at any point. Like, that was really her goal, I'm pretty sure, was to kill Charlotte. And she tracks her down several times and like taunts her and plays with her food and, you know, messes with certain parts of Charlotte's life and like follows her all around the United States and like tracks her down repeatedly. And I feel like she just could have killed her. Like, if you want to kill her, just kill her. I mean, she likes the hunt. That is a character trait of hers. But like, at some point, what is your end goal? Is Charlotte gonna fall back in love with you? No. Or just kill her. Just kill her, man. And I feel like she could have done that. I feel like Sabine should have won this interaction. I don't know why these babies bested her. It was just weird. But also, I don't know. Sabine didn't have a plot. She didn't have a goal. She has no driving force. There is no driving force of this novel. Sabine is just, you know, living life, seeing what happens. That's not a driving force. There's always a goal. At least Alice has the goal of finding the woman who did this to her and figuring out why this happened to her. Charlotte also doesn't really have a goal until Sabine starts stalking her, and then her goal is presented through the lens of Alice. Because I guess her goal is to kill Sabine at some point, but that's not her starting goal. She's just like a girl, she's a queer girl, and she's about to be married off, and she is noble, and she has to do all of these things and fit into these roles and play into societal expectations that she doesn't want to. And then she meets Sabine and they fall in love. And then Sabine starts stalking her. So then at that point she has a crazy ex that she has to deal with, which she doesn't really have like a driving force plot either. In her perspective. She kind of does. More than Sabine, but not as much as Alice, I guess. So this book didn't have any plot. The way the perspectives are divvied up are weird. Oh, also the chapter breaks are weird. So we'll get like Sabine, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and then we'll go Alice, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, and then it'll go back to Sabine, chapter 1, and it's like, why not? Why? That's just a weird decision. That's a really, really minor, I don't even know if that's a critique. That's just like a quirk of the book where it just tells you how many chapters in a row have been Sabine's or Alice's, but it doesn't tell you like, this is chapter 42, Alice's point of view. So the numbers like reset, and I don't really know why you would go with that. I mean, it doesn't hurt the book, but I don't know that it helped, except to be like, if you wanted to count how many scenes each of these characters had, like how many chapters each of these characters had. But I don't know who really like cares. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care that the last 4 chapters have been in Sabine's point of view. Like, why do I need to know that at any given time? I don't know. That's just weird. I've never seen a titling convention like that. So this didn't really hit for me. I think I'm gonna give this like a 2.5. I was debating giving this 3 because I did get into it. It took me a while because it's like sad girl tone, and then so much of the beginning of this book feels like exposition, and I was really, really waiting for the plot to start, and then at some point I realized that there was no plot, and it was just vignettes of a life story. And at that point I just like accepted my fate, and then I kind of got into it. If you go in knowing that this doesn't have a plot, you'll have a better time. But for me, this like dragged a lot, and it's like a sad girl tone, and I'm like, there's too much backstory, too much of this like isn't that relevant, and I just wanted some action. So I was a bit disappointed with this, and then the ending threw me off. Again, I was debating like 3 stars because I was kind of into it. It's very well written, the prose is beautiful, even if it can get a bit repetitive at times, because this is a long book, and again, a lot of the scenes don't have a lot of meaning, and a lot of the scenes say the same thing. So a lot of the scenes don't matter, or like don't tell you any new information, really. So you get like some repeated information and repeated thematics, but like you already know that stuff. So this definitely probably did not need to be this long. Definitely, probably. That sentence didn't need to be phrased like that either. That sentence also could have been shorter, more curt, more efficient. Just like that run-on sentence at the end there, where I just described multiple phrases that all mean the same thing. That's the book kind of does that at some points, but it's beautifully written, so you don't really mind as much as you mind it here, where I'm just rambling inefficiently and not very well spokenly, because I'm not a very well spoken person. But anyway, I was missing the plot. It was almost 3 stars, but then the end soured it, because I don't know. I don't know what the end was trying to say. Wasn't very satisfying. Wasn't super believable. So like a 2.5, and a lot of that is from the strength of the writing. And some of the character work I did really like. I mean, I like Sabine as this very complex woman in a bad situation who makes the best of her surroundings. Like Charlotte. All of these stories are fairly interesting on their own, but it's when you bring them all together, they kind of clash. And it felt like she couldn't decide between a big historical novel about Maria or like a contemporary coming of age vampire tale about Alice. And so she just like did both and smushed them together. And I think this book would have been more successful if it had focused on one character and like one perspective and had a plot. That would have helped me. But maybe that's me. I could see how some people would like this book though, but I was a bit disappointed. Maybe that's because it was hyped up so much. But it is well written, and it wasn't the worst thing I've ever read for sure. And I do think I'll remember it fairly well. This isn't like a super forgettable throwaway kind of book. I think it will stick with me a bit. But it wasn't super satisfying in a way that I had hoped it would be. So that was Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by Nina LaCour.